Your neighbor is out in the yard with a metal pump sprayer, dousing the rose bushes in something that smells like a chemistry lab. Nobody blinks. Your dad just scattered white granules across the lawn like he was feeding pigeons. And your mom is rubbing some kind of oil into the redwood furniture that makes your eyes water from 10 feet away. The kids are running barefoot through the sprinkler, leaning against a stack of greenish pressure-treated lumber piled along the fence that Dad bought for the new deck. This was a normal Saturday in the 1970s. Every single one of those things, from the chemicals under the porch to the wood stacked by the garage to the grill on the patio, has since been pulled off shelves, recalled, or flat-out banned. So hit subscribe because here are 25 backyard products from the 1970s that are now banned. Number 25. DDT Garden Spray. Before 1972, you could walk into any hardware store in the country and buy a can of DDT, like it was regular bug spray, because that is exactly what it was. Your dad pumped it out of a brass nozzle tank sprayer, coating the tomato plants, the roses, the whole vegetable garden in a fine white mist. It hung in the air and drifted across the fence. Nobody moved away from it. Kids played 10 feet from the cloud. Dogs walked through the puddles it left on the patio stones. It killed everything it touched. Aphids, beetles, mosquitoes, all of them dead within minutes. But DDT built up in the soil, in the water, and in the food chain. Birds started laying eggs with shells so thin they cracked under the weight of the mother sitting on the nest. The bald eagle nearly disappeared from the continent. The Environmental Protection Agency banned DDT for agricultural and residential use in 1972, and that metal sprayer went from every garage shelf in America to a hazardous waste category almost overnight. Number 24. CCA, pressure-treated lumber. Every deck, every fence, every backyard playset built in the 1970s had the same greenish tint. That color came from chromated copper arsenate, a chemical cocktail pressure forced deep into the wood to keep it from rotting. Lumberyards sold it by the truckload. Fathers built swing sets out of it. Mothers planted vegetable gardens right next to it. Children sat on it, climbed it, pressed their bare skin against it on hot summer afternoons when the wood was warm to the touch. The problem was the arsenic. Over time, rain and sun pulled the chemical out of the wood grain and deposited it into the surrounding soil. Studies found elevated arsenic levels in dirt around treated structures, right where children played and families grew tomatoes. The wood itself left residue on hands. By the early 2000s, the Environmental Protection Agency reached an agreement with manufacturers to stop producing CCA-treated wood for residential use entirely. That voluntary phase-out became effective at the end of 2003. Today, you cannot buy CCA-treated lumber for a backyard deck, a porch railing, or a child's playset anywhere in the United States. The greenish wood is gone from every lumber aisle in the country. Number 23. Chlordane termite treatment. If your house had termites in the 1970s, the exterminator came out and trenched your foundation with chlordane. But plenty of homeowners just did it themselves. You mixed the milky concentrate with water in a bucket, poured it into a shallow trench dug around the perimeter of your house, and soaked the soil until it was dripping. The chemical was so persistent it stayed active in the ground for over 20 years. That was considered a selling point. You treated once and the termites were gone for a generation. But chlordane does not just kill termites. It accumulates in human tissue, particularly in fat, and researchers linked chronic exposure to serious health problems. Families living above chlordane-treated soil reported the smell coming up through their floorboards years later. The EPA pulled it from the consumer market, and today, if a home inspector finds chlordane contamination in soil around a foundation, it triggers a full hazardous materials protocol. Number 22. Lead paint on swing sets. Every metal swing set sold in America came factory-coated in bright enamel paint, and until 1978, that paint was loaded with lead. The chains, the slide, the A-frame legs, the crossbar, all of it. Kids gripped those hot metal chains for hours every summer afternoon. The sun baked the paint until it bubbled, chipped and flaked off in little curls, and little hands covered in paint dust went straight into little mouths. Nobody connected the dots for years. The color was pretty, it held up well in weather, and it went on smooth. When the federal government finally banned lead in residential paint in 1978, millions of backyard swing sets became contaminated equipment overnight. Some families stripped and repainted them. Most had no idea the danger was there until the sets rusted through and got hauled to the dump decades later. Number 21. Creosote fence posts and garden borders. You knew creosote by the smell before you ever saw it. That dark, tarry, almost sweet chemical odor that hung around railroad ties and fence posts on a hot day. In the 1970s, homeowners bought creosote by the gallon at the hardware store and soaked their fence posts, garden timbers, and raised bed borders in it to keep the wood from rotting. It turned everything an oily brownish black, and nothing grew within 6 inches of treated wood. Bugs avoided it. Rot could not touch it. But creosote is a coal tar derivative loaded with compounds that have since been classified as carcinogenic. The skin irritation was immediate. The long-term effects took longer to document. The EPA restricted consumer sale of creosote, and today it is only approved for industrial and commercial use by licensed applicators. Your backyard fence project no longer qualifies. Number 20. Flat swimming pool drain covers. If your family had a backyard pool in the 1970s, there was a drain at the bottom. A flat grate, usually white plastic or metal, bolted flush to the floor of the deep end. You swam over it every day without thinking about it. Kids would dive down and touch it on a dare, pressing their palms flat against the cover just to prove they could reach the bottom. The suction behind that drain was enormous. The pump that circulated the water created a vacuum powerful enough to pin a grown adult to the floor if they got too close. And the flat design of those old covers was the problem. A body, a limb, even a clump of hair could seal against the surface and create a bond that no amount of thrashing could break. Children drowned in backyard pools across the country because they were pulled to the bottom and held there by a drain they had swum over hundreds of times before. The entrapment was silent. There was no splashing, no screaming. A child would simply disappear beneath the surface, and by the time anyone noticed, the suction had done its work. Parents jumped in and could not pull their own children free. The forces involved were measured in hundreds of pounds. For decades, nothing changed. Pool builders kept installing the same flat covers. Homeowners never thought to ask about the drain. It was just part of the pool, like the ladder or the skimmer basket. It took a string of documented deaths, including a case so devastating it became national news, before Congress passed a federal law mandating anti-entrapment drain covers on every pool and spa in the country. The old flat covers were banned outright. Every pool, public and private, had to be retrofitted with domed, channeled covers designed to break the suction seal if a body made contact. The law carried the name of a child who did not survive her family's backyard pool. Today, if you look at the drain in any pool built or renovated after that law took effect, the cover is raised, curved, oversized. That design exists because the flat one killed people. Number 19. Dieldrin pesticide. Dieldrin was the heavy artillery of backyard pest control, stronger than DDT, longer lasting, and far more toxic to mammals, including humans. Your dad sprayed it around the foundation of the house, across the lawn, and along the garden beds to kill ants, grubs, and soil-dwelling beetles. It wiped them out completely. The problem was that Dieldrin did not break down. It lodged in the soil for years, worked its way into groundwater, and accumulated in the fatty tissue of anything that consumed contaminated insects or plants. The EPA classified it as a probable human carcinogen and banned it for virtually all domestic uses. If you grew up in a house where the yard was treated with Dieldrin in the 1970s, traces of that chemical may still be detectable in the soil beneath your childhood lawn today, half a century later. Number 18. Backyard trash incinerators. In the early 1970s, burning your own garbage was not just common, it was how you handled waste. Plenty of smaller towns had no curbside pickup at all, and even in suburbs that did, many families just burned the overflow rather than wait for collection day. You had a wire mesh barrel or a concrete block pit in the far corner of the yard, and every few days you hauled out the kitchen scraps, the junk mail, the cardboard boxes, and you lit it all with a match. The smoke rolled across the fences. Your neighbor smelled your garbage and you smelled his. Nobody complained because everybody did it, but burning household waste releases dioxins, heavy metals, and particulate matter into the air at ground level, right where people breathe it. As air quality regulations tightened through the 1970s and 1980s, municipalities across the country passed local burn bans one by one. Today, backyard incineration of household waste is illegal in the vast majority of the United States. Number 17. The herbicide 2,4,5-T. This was one of the two active ingredients in Agent Orange, the defoliant sprayed across the jungles of Vietnam. But in American backyards, it was sold as ordinary weed killer. You could buy it at the garden center in a bottle and spray it on your lawn, your fence line, your driveway cracks, anywhere broadleaf weeds were growing. It killed dandelions and clover without touching the grass, and it worked fast. But 2,4,5-T contained trace amounts of dioxin, one of the most toxic synthetic compounds ever produced. The contamination was a byproduct of manufacturing, not an intentional ingredient, but it was there in every bottle. After mounting evidence of birth defects and other serious health effects, the EPA issued an emergency suspension of 2,4,5-T in 1979, and it was off store shelves within months. Number 16. Asbestos in charcoal grills and patio heaters. Asbestos was in everything in the 1970s, and the backyard was no exception. Certain charcoal grill models used asbestos pads as insulation and heat shields beneath the firebox. Patio heaters and outdoor gas lamps had asbestos gaskets around the burner housing. Even some garden sheds were built with corrugated asbestos cement panels for the roof. It was fireproof, it was cheap, and it lasted forever. But when asbestos materials age and deteriorate, those microscopic fibers become airborne. One deep breath near a crumbling asbestos pad can lodge fibers in lung tissue where they remain for life. The EPA and Consumer Product Safety Commission moved to ban most asbestos consumer products. Today, those old grill pads and heater linings are classified as hazardous material requiring specialized removal. Number 15. Heptachlor lawn granules. Heptachlor was the weapon of choice for fire ants, lawn grubs, and soil-dwelling pests across the South and Midwest. It came in white granular form, and you loaded it into a broadcast spreader and walked your yard in neat rows on a spring morning, the same way you would spread fertilizer. The smell was sharp, almost metallic, and it clung to your shoes and your clothes for the rest of the day. Your dad told the kids to stay off the grass for a day, maybe two, and then everyone went right back to walking on it barefoot, running through it, rolling in it, lying face down reading a comic book on a lawn that had been soaked in an organochlorine compound days earlier. Heptachlor did not break down in sunlight or rain the way the label implied it would. It soaked deep into the root zone, bonded with soil particles, stayed biologically active for years, and migrated steadily into groundwater with every heavy rain. Researchers eventually found it showing up in the milk of dairy cows that grazed on pastures near treated agricultural fields, which proved definitively that it was entering the human food chain the same way DDT had a decade earlier. The health concerns stacked up year after year through the late 1970s and into the 1980s. Chronic exposure data pointed toward liver damage and other serious effects. The EPA moved first to restrict and then to effectively ban heptachlor for all residential lawn uses and most agricultural applications. Those white granules your dad loaded into the broadcast spreader every April became a controlled substance overnight. The fire ants came back within a single season, and every lawn care company in the Sun Belt had to completely rethink how they managed a residential yard without the one chemical they had relied on for a generation. The product that was marketed as a permanent, one-application solution turned out to be a permanent problem lodged in the soil beneath the grass your family walked on every day. Number 14. Pentachlorophenol deck sealant. They called it Penta, and it was the strongest wood preservative a homeowner could buy over the counter. You brushed it onto decks, fence rails, and outdoor furniture with a wide paintbrush to keep the wood from rotting. It gave everything a yellowish tinge and left a sharp chemical odor that lingered in the yard for days after application. Penta was so toxic that the label eventually required rubber gloves and eye protection. But in the early 1970s, most people slathered it on barehanded and wiped their hands on their jeans. The EPA classified pentachlorophenol as a restricted-use pesticide available only to certified commercial applicators, effectively pulling it from the consumer market. Your weekend deck project no longer included it as an option. Number 13. Mercury fungicide for lawns. If your lawn had brown patches or fungal disease eating through the grass, your local garden center might have sold you a mercury-based fungicide. These came in granular form and contained mercuric chloride or similar compounds. You applied them the same way you would any lawn treatment. A broadcast spreader. A Saturday morning, bare hands brushing the granules off your pant legs. Mercury is a potent neurotoxin that does not leave the body easily once absorbed. It accumulates in soil, washes into waterways, and enters the food chain through fish and wildlife. The EPA banned mercury-based pesticides for turf and residential use. Today, the idea of voluntarily scattering mercury compounds across a yard where children play sounds medieval. But it was just routine maintenance in 1974. Number 12. Carbon tetrachloride as a household solvent. This one lived on the back porch shelf in a metal can with a screw cap, right next to the turpentine and the motor oil. People used it on everything outdoors. Grease stains on the concrete, tar spots on hand tools, oil drips on the driveway. You poured some on a rag, wiped, and the stain vanished. It evaporated clean and left no residue, which made it feel like a miracle product. Carbon tetrachloride is a chlorinated solvent, and it is severely toxic to the liver and kidneys even in moderate exposure. Breathing the fumes in a garage or enclosed porch could cause organ damage. The EPA and FDA banned its sale as a consumer cleaning product. It disappeared from hardware store shelves and porch shelves alike, replaced by less effective but far less deadly alternatives. Number 11. EDB soil fumigant. If you had a vegetable garden in the 1970s, there was a good chance you poured this into your soil before planting season. Ethylene dibromide, sold under brand names like Dowfume and Soil Brom, came in cans and bottles at garden supply stores across the country. You mixed it into the top layer of dirt to kill nematodes, grubs, and soil-borne fungi before putting your seedlings in. Millions of home gardeners used it without a second thought. Then the chemical started showing up in groundwater. Wells near treated farmland and residential lots tested positive for EDB at levels that alarmed toxicologists. The compound did not break down the way regulators had assumed. It seeped through soil, reached the water table, and stayed there. The Environmental Protection Agency issued an emergency suspension in 1983, pulling EDB from soil fumigant use, and had phased out virtually all other civilian applications by 1984. One season you could buy it at the hardware store. The next season the shelves were bare. Number 10. Diazinon lawn and garden insecticide. For most of the 1970s, 1980s, and into the 1990s, diazinon was the single most widely used insecticide for residential lawns and gardens in the entire United States. You could buy it at any hardware store, any garden center, any grocery store that carried a lawn care aisle. It came in liquid concentrate you mixed in a hose and sprayer, and in granular form you scattered from a bag. Homeowners used it on everything. Grubs chewing up the lawn, aphids clustering on the rose bushes, ants marching in columns along the patio edge, fleas infesting the yard where the dog slept, Japanese beetles stripping the vegetable garden overnight. One product, one application, and the problem was gone by morning. It worked on contact, it was cheap, and for 2 decades, it was the default answer to any backyard insect problem in suburban America. But diazinon was killing birds in numbers that alarmed wildlife biologists across the country. Large flocks of Canada geese and other waterfowl were found dead on golf courses and residential lawns within hours of treatment. Songbirds that foraged for insects on freshly treated grass dropped dead in the yard. The documented kills were not isolated incidents. They were happening in every state where the product was sold, which was all of them. Beyond the bird mortality, diazinon was contaminating urban waterways on a scale that nobody had anticipated. Every time it rained, the chemical washed off millions of treated lawns into storm drains, and from storm drains into creeks, rivers, and estuaries where it proved acutely toxic to fish and aquatic invertebrates at concentrations so low they were measured in parts per billion. Municipal water treatment systems were detecting it in source water. The EPA negotiated a phase-out agreement with the manufacturers rather than impose an outright emergency ban. Indoor uses went first, lawn and garden uses were eliminated next, and by the mid-2000s, you could no longer purchase diazinon for any residential purpose anywhere in the country. A chemical that had been as common and unremarkable as a bag of lawn fertilizer, something every homeowner kept in the garage without a second thought, simply ceased to exist on American store shelves. Number 9. Lead-stabilized vinyl garden hoses. The standard green vinyl garden hose sold throughout the 1970s contained lead compounds as a stabilizer in the plastic itself. You dragged it across the lawn all summer, left it coiled in the sun for hours, and then let the kids drink from it when they got thirsty. That first warm blast of water that had been sitting inside the hose all afternoon carried lead at levels that would alarm any modern water quality test. The brass fittings on both ends contained lead too. Nobody tested garden hose water. Nobody thought of it as a drinking water source, even though that is exactly how every child in America used it. Federal law eventually classified those fittings and formulations as a public health hazard. Regulations lowered the allowable lead content in anything that touched drinking water to a fraction of what those old hoses contained, and the lead-stabilized vinyl formulas were pulled from production. The hoses you buy today are stamped lead-free and drinking water safe for a reason. The ones from the 1970s were neither. Number 8. Parathion Home Garden Insecticide. Parathion was developed for agriculture, but diluted formulations were available for home garden use through the 1970s. It belonged to the organophosphate chemical family, the same class of compounds originally developed as nerve agents. It killed insects on contact by disrupting their nervous systems, and it did the same to humans at higher doses. The safety margin between an effective insect-killing concentration and a dangerous human exposure was alarmingly narrow. Farm workers suffered acute poisoning from skin contact alone. Home gardeners wearing shorts and sandals while spraying their tomato plants had even less protection. The EPA progressively restricted and then banned most uses of parathion. Today, it is recognized as one of the most acutely toxic pesticides ever marketed to ordinary consumers. Number 7. Cherry bombs and M80 fireworks. In the 1970s, the 4th of July meant your dad drove across the state line and came back with a trunk full of ordnance that was illegal where you lived. Cherry bombs, M80s, and silver salutes were the big ones. These were not firecrackers. A cherry bomb could blow a metal coffee can apart at the seams. An M80 contained enough explosive powder to take fingers off, and kids found that out the hard way every single summer. They lit them in backyards, storm drains, mailboxes, and empty lots. The Consumer Product Safety Commission banned cherry bombs, silver salutes, M80s, and any firecracker containing more than 50 milligrams of explosive composition. That federal regulation remains in effect today. Anything sold legally now is a fraction of the power those old firecrackers packed. Number 6. Toxaphene Garden Insecticide. Toxaphene was a chlorinated pesticide used on agricultural crops by the ton, but it was also packaged and sold for home garden and lawn use in liquid and dust form. You loaded it in the same pump sprayer you used for everything else in the yard. It was cheap, it was effective against a wide range of insects, and it was available everywhere. But toxaphene proved to be one of the most environmentally persistent chemicals ever released. It accumulated in soil, in fish, in wildlife, and eventually in human tissue samples collected from people who had never handled the product directly. It traveled through water and through the food chain. The EPA issued a complete ban on all uses of toxaphene, making it one of the first pesticides in American history to receive a total prohibition rather than just a restriction. Number 5. Lindane Lawn and Lice Treatment. Lindane was an organochlorine pesticide that homeowners applied to lawns for grub and beetle control. You mixed it into water and sprayed it directly on the grass with a hose end sprayer. It was also, remarkably, the active ingredient in prescription lice shampoos applied directly to children's scalps. The same chemical compound going on your lawn Saturday morning could be going on your child's head Saturday night. Lindane is a documented neurotoxin that persists in soil and water and accumulates in human tissue. The EPA banned or severely restricted most agricultural and residential uses. The fact that it was sold simultaneously as a yard pesticide and a children's hair treatment tells you everything about how differently chemicals were evaluated in the 1970s. Number 4. Three-wheeled all-terrain vehicles. The three-wheeled ATV was the backyard toy of the late 1970s and early 1980s. One fat front tire, two in the back, a small engine, no roll cage, no seatbelt, and a center of gravity so high that turning at any real speed tipped the whole machine sideways. Families bought them for property use, for riding trails behind the house, for letting teenagers tear across open fields on summer afternoons. They were everywhere in rural America. The problem was physics. Three wheels cannot stabilize the way four can. A rut, a slope, a sharp turn at speed, and the ATV rolled. It rolled onto the rider. There was nothing between the operator and the ground but momentum and weight. The injuries were catastrophic. Crushed limbs, spinal fractures, head trauma. Hundreds of people died, many of them children. The Consumer Product Safety Commission took action and banned the sale of all new three-wheeled ATVs in the country. Every major manufacturer signed the agreement. After that, no three-wheeler could be legally produced or sold as new in the United States. The four-wheeled ATV replaced it entirely, but those old three-wheelers are still out there in barns and garages across the country, and they ride exactly the way they always did. Number 3. Backyard cesspools. In the 1970s, millions of suburban and rural homes still relied on open or semi-open cesspools in the backyard instead of engineered septic systems. A cesspool was essentially a pit in the ground, sometimes lined with loose stone or dry stacked brick, where all the household wastewater drained. Toilet water, sink water, laundry water, all of it. The liquid seeped through the gaps in the stone into the surrounding earth. In theory, the soil filtered contaminants before they reached groundwater. In practice, raw sewage leached directly into the water table, contaminating drinking wells for entire neighborhoods. Health departments documented outbreaks traced to failing cesspools. Federal and state codes gradually outlawed new cesspool construction and required existing ones to be decommissioned and replaced with proper septic systems or municipal connections. Number 2. Non-tempered plate glass patio doors. Every suburban home built in the 1960s and 1970s had a sliding glass door leading out to the backyard. It was the gateway to summer. You pulled it open to let the dog out, carried plates of hamburgers through it to the patio grill, and watched the kids play in the sprinkler through the glass while you stood in the air conditioning. The problem was the glass itself. Those doors were made of ordinary plate glass, the same material used in regular windows, just scaled up to the size of a wall panel. It looked solid. It looked like a wall. And that was exactly the danger. A child running in from the backyard at full speed, a teenager not seeing the door was closed, a guest at a barbecue stepping toward what looked like an open doorway. They hit the glass, and it did not crack. It shattered. Plate glass breaks into long, jagged shards with edges sharp enough to sever arteries. The injuries were horrific. Deep lacerations to the face, neck, arms, and torso. Emergency rooms across the country treated thousands of these cases every year. After enough documented tragedies, the Consumer Product Safety Commission established a mandatory safety standard requiring all architectural glass in doors, storm doors, bathtub enclosures, and other hazardous locations to be made of tempered or laminated safety glass. Tempered glass, when it breaks, crumbles into small blunt pebbles instead of blades. The old plate glass doors were banned from production. Every replacement door from that point forward had to meet the new standard. But for a full generation of American families, that beautiful sliding door to the backyard was a guillotine waiting for someone to walk into it. Number 1. Carbofuran granular pesticide. Carbofuran was one of the most acutely toxic pesticides ever registered for sale in the United States. In granular form, it was scattered on lawns and garden soil to kill grubs, beetles, and soil insects, and it was devastatingly effective. A single granule could kill a songbird that picked it up, mistaking it for a seed. Raptors that ate poisoned rodents died too, creating a cascading kill chain through the local ecosystem. Entire bird populations declined in areas where carbofuran was commonly used. The chemical was so potent that the EPA eventually banned the granular formulation entirely, citing risks to birds and wildlife that were simply unacceptable under any cost-benefit analysis. The liquid version persisted in agriculture longer, but that handful of purple granules that homeowners once scattered across their yards by hand, the same grass where their dogs rolled and their children sat, is gone from the American market permanently. That was 25 products that sat in American backyards for years, sometimes decades, before anyone decided they probably should not be there. If any of these brought back a memory of your parents' yard, the smell of that old sprayer, the sound of those clacker balls, drop a comment and tell us which ones your family had. Share this with someone who grew up in it. And if you are new here, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next.